Today, it's all about insubordination. So stay with us. You're the human resource. You know, it's interesting because every so often I will have somebody say, well, they were just so insubordinate and we're just going to terminate them. And I was in North Carolina with a client last week, and the conversation came up, and one of the directors looked at me and said, well, at any other job, I would have just terminated him right away because he can't talk to me like that. And I thought, this is a really good time. I'm seeing so much energy and so much uncertainty, insecurity, tension. People are off balance right now. There's a lot going on. And as human resource representatives, as leaders in your company, you have to deal with, you just don't know from day to day what you're going to be dealing with. I was talking to a retail manager the other day on the phone, and she said, I walk in to start the day and I've got two grown men in each other's face, and one saying he's going to beat the crud out of that one, and the other one's going, bring it on. And then some of the other managers were chiming in, and she said, these are adults. What I don't understand. And the problem is there is no real answer. There is no magic pill that we can take or we can give to them to address what we're dealing with. But again, as leaders of your organization, the more we can, people like me, can educate you and prepare you and equip you to deal with these circumstances, please, take as much information as we can give you. So today's topic is insubordination, because I feel that there's a lot of confusion around that term. So we're even going to be talking about, I want you to take notes, because I want you to even look at what your handbook has. And most of my clients know that if you're going to have insubordination in your handbook, you've got to be very specific as to what that clearly means. And the organization, from a government perspective, that we're going to be most sensitive to is the National Labor Relations Act. Now, why? Think to yourself, why would we be worried about them when it comes to insubordination? And this is where most of the confusion comes in from your team, because most of you are not talking to your team about the protections under Section 7 with the National Labor Relations Act. Now, I did a podcast here quite a while ago on it, so if you need to go back and refresh your memory on it, please do. But that protects employees from talking about the compensation, work conditions, terms of employment. Okay, those three categories they're locked and loaded with the National Labor Relations Act. But think about it. If one of your employees gets unsettled, disgruntled, frustrated because they didn't get a raise or they didn't get a promotion, or somebody else gets more PTO than they do, or someone, it could even include harassment. If they feel that they're not safe, that's a work condition. They are permitted to not only complain about that, but they're also allowed and permitted to have and enter in concerted activity. And I did a whole podcast on that as well. So when our supervisors, when our team leads see this and start hearing the uproar or the negative conversations on the floor, what is the first thing they're thinking of? Especially if they're going to them and saying, hey, cut that out, get back to work. Hey, we don't need that now. I'm not paying you to complain. Buck it up, get back to work. They're thinking insubordination. And this is where the line's drawn. So let's go back to your handbook. What I want you to be thinking about in regards to your handbook is literally what Scott and I were talking about here a couple weeks ago, and he wrote just a divine policy phrase for your work rules or your personal conduct section of your handbook, defining insubordination in this circumstance. And his terms are insubordination, which is defined as refusing to follow a company official's or superior's legal directive or engaging in any conduct, either on duty or off duty, that would be considered defamatory, vulgar, obscene, threatening, maliciously dishonest, unlawful, or illegally discriminatory or harassing towards the company, its employees, customers, or competitors. Now, let's break this down a little bit. Insubordination, defined as refusing to follow a company official's or superior's legal directive or engaging in any conduct on duty or off duty. What does that include? That means social media, folks. That means that if they are refusing and they're throwing an emotional tantrum or they're expressing themselves because they don't want to do something asked of them and they take it to social media, if it has nothing to do with those three categories, it may very well be insubordination. And notice the terms that he put there at the end: defamatory, vulgar, obscene, threatening, maliciously dishonest, unlawful, illegal. None of those things are protected. No one, no agency is going to protect activities involving any discrimination, harassment. No one's going to get protected for that kind of stuff unless it is involving, and I say this with a may, involving one of those three categories. Now, why do I say that? Because in the perception of your supervisors, in the perception of your team leads, if an employee out in the front of everybody decides that they're going to start calling them a effing AH or, whatever, that sounds vulgar. But if it's because they feel like that individual is sexually harassing them, or if they feel that that individual overlooked them and discriminated against them because of their age or their ethnicity or their religion, there's a good chance they're going to get away with it. That would not be insubordination. But you have to remember, calm these situations down. You don't want to terminate somebody just because they throw a tantrum on the floor. Protocols that I would recommend: understanding first the definition of insubordination. Understanding second, the National Labor Relations Act. And then partner with those supervisors and help them de-escalate the situation. Pull those employees in, off the floor, in an area where you can speak freely and calmly. Pull the emotion out of the conversation. Document everything you possibly can. Get to the heart of the topic or the whatever stemmed to the situation. And remember, if the individual walks off, and I remember distinctly at one plastics manufacturer that I used to work with, we would have individuals get really mad because they felt there was too much grease on the floor, or they didn't feel like they had been trained correctly, and they would just charge out of the building. You can't fire them for that. You have to identify the real reason they're ghosting you or they're leaving you, and then address it. Do what you can to change the work conditions. Do what you can to help them understand why the compensation is not the same or why you gave someone different PTO. Address the situation and have a conversation and see if they are willing to come back to work. You can't put insubordination down as a reason for firing somebody or terminating somebody unless you can verify that it had nothing to do with those three terms protected under the National Labor Relations Act. Again, this is a wonderful phrase of definition for insubordination that I would highly recommend putting in your handbook. And if you need more work on this, please reach out to Scott Warwick or give me a call. Reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll be more than happy to give it to you. But insubordination is not always the same for everyone. So work with your teams. Help them understand. And help us understand what you'd like to hear. Remember, this show's for you. So your recommendations is how we come up with our topics. So let us know what you're thinking. Let us know how we're doing here at the Human Resource.